Hello, Brad here, just to say we're super proud that the Friday 5pm podcast is sponsored by the Malt Miller, the UK's best home brew store.
We use the Malt Miller for all of our homebrew experiments, as well as tapping them up for advice and binging on their awesome YouTube channel all the time.
That's why whenever we release a homebrew video, we put a recipe kit live on the Malt Miller, so you can brew with the exact same amazing ingredients that we did. The same ingredients used by pro brewers.
So alongside the Malt Miller's nitro-flushed hops, cold-stored yeast and milled-to-order malts, you can pick up recipe kits for our 5 Points Best Bitter, Russian River West Coast IPA, and now the fastest beer in the world, a hazy session IPA that goes from grain to glass in less than 48 hours.
Sign up to their newsletter at tinyurl.com/Malt Miller to get 5% off your first order. With the Malt Miller's amazing customer service and Jonny's 48-hour recipe, you could order the ingredients on a Monday and be drinking the beer by the weekend.
Speaking of which, it's Friday.
It's 5pm.
So enjoy this week's Friday 5pm podcast. Bradley, I need to ask you a favour.
Go on.
At the end of this podcast,
Yes.
can you remind me to turn my glycol chiller back on?
That's a lot of responsibility, Jonny, but I will endeavour to remind you.
Well, I feel like if there's two of us remembering, because I keep after we record these, I have to turn the glycol chiller off because it's a noisy bastard, and every single week without fail, I forget to turn it back on, which means that the Pilsner that we were drinking on Monday and we might get into went through a slightly odd lagering phase in which occasionally it would just spend the weekend at about 8 degrees.
Nice. It makes it stronger, right? Like some sort of extra hard, double hard bastard Pilsner where it can take anything, Jonny. You stressed it.
I think it just increases the chance of oxidation as it sucks more air in and then pushes it out and then sucks more air in and pushes it back out.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Well, I'll remind you then. How's about that?
But the Pilsner was tasting good when we had our filming day on Monday, right?
Lovely. Delicious, sweet, crisp. I love the little sweetness to it. Yeah, it's real nice. I was amazed how good it was tasting.
Yeah, we've been saying for years that lager is hard to make, and actually, it was the tough stuff of it, like the trying to get a clean fermentation, trying to get lots of malt character was it went fine. The the hard bit was that I completely over hopped it. And potentially we'll see how it ages in keg. Might have oxidized it with a slightly bad temperature control. But I'm getting very excited for our lager homebrew episode, which will be May or June time, somewhere around then, and we'll announce who it's with relatively soon. But I'm glad you like it. That was melladoid in malt instead of decoction, but I'm going to do another batch and try decoction quite soon.
Amazing. So if we get it out then, does that give anyone at home enough chance to be drinking it in the summer? It does, doesn't it? Hopefully.
Oh yeah. So this batch was lagered for 4 weeks. So it was
nice.
12 days fermentation, then a 3-day diacetyl rest, and then 4 weeks of lagering. So it's basically 6 weeks from brew day. You can enjoy it.
Amazing.
So
can't wait.
Yeah, plenty of time for summer. But also, lager's not just for summer, Bradley.
No, I know that.
Now that we have heating in our houses, we can make ourselves too warm and need a Pilsner any time of year.
True that. It's a great way to cool down for sure. But with the prices of gas these days, I'm not sure anyone's too warm in their homes, right?
With the price of gas and the fact that the main source of it might have been cut off by World War III. Yay! But
we've gone there already. I'm feeling pretty bummed out, to be honest, but I'm trying to stay positive. But yeah,
exactly. We'll use this podcast for positive vibes only.
Right. Yeah.
We'll just block out everything else.
Yeah. I had the TV on in the background at the beginning of this, and I've just turned it off because it was just
what?
just.
Why would you do that?
I had it where we had some technical issues. It was just on in the background, on silent. But it's not something I normally do. That's just where I'm in a heightened state.
I was going to say, am I that boring
panic.
to talk to? Even when we're making content, you're like, I need the telly on because Johnny's going to spout about CAMRA's new definition of real ale.
You've shot shot the load of the question there, Johnny, all over the microphone.
Oh dear, no, Bradley.
Dear.
No. Back to conversations about war, please. What have you been up to this week? Have you done anything beery?
Well, yeah, because we were drinking and filming together. We only knocked out pretty much 4 videos on Monday, didn't we?
We were. There was. I realised that we'd probably done a little bit too much in the day. A, when it got dark, but B, when you had to bail halfway through a video, you were dancing on your feet, desperate to go to the loo, and then just basically ran out mid-shoot.
I needed a wee real bad, real bad. So I felt like a toddler again, where I just couldn't control my body. But yeah, it's because we did such a bloody long day of filming and drank copious amounts of beer, which was great. Don't get me wrong, but needed to, nature was calling.
It did, but like calling insistently, like endless WhatsApps, calls, yeah.
Yeah.
Nature got real needy. We had a great day of filming on Monday, in which we filmed. They're talking about our editorial code, which we think has got the all clear from the Patreon community. They're all on board. So we talked about that. And we also filmed this week's video, in fact. So that was a quick turnaround, the monkish beer, and we'll get into that. And then we also filmed one that probably might not see the light of day. I don't know.
We didn't film it in the light of day, that's for sure.
No, it was very much filmed in the dark, and we had a beer that wasn't great, which was the Rochefort Triple. Don't hype that beer up. It wasn't very good at all, tragically. And then we filmed the next Lowbrow, or Lowbroy, I should say.
Lowbrow, Johnny, lowbrow. We're only incorrect pronunciations on lowbrow. Sorry.
Are we gonna say what it is, or are we gonna save the surprise for St. Patrick's Day?
Well, it depends. Great surprise there, Johnny. Just bloody blown it again, mate. We might have visited the home methods of obtaining a pint of the perfect black stuff. So yeah, we're looking at a very, very hard to get Guinness gadget, and we're gonna blow the lid right off of it, Johnny. See if it lives up to the hype. Looking to the crazy sort of technology involved. I'm not sure it's that crazy. And look at the sort of different sort of shapes and size cans that are available on the market, and all sorts of different sort of facets of the world of Guinness, I suppose, and home serving of Guinness. So yes, I've just totally told the nitro beer.
Yeah, should be a good episode, and obviously that will be coming out middle of March for some reason. We had that shoot day on Monday, and then yesterday I had the honour of visiting Duration Brewing for the first time, nice. Which was, just one of the most beautiful breweries I've ever been to. It's a 16th century barn on the site of a 10th century priory that was torn down by Henry VIII.
Blimey.
You don't get that in America, do you, craft beer? It's a magic space, and they've extended like the old school barn because it was a proper ruin. So they sort of filled in the gaps with some very sympathetic new builds and stuff. But they're like one end of it is still completely open and just sort of propped up by big steel girders. So eventually it's not finished yet, is what I'm trying to say. And the special project might have something to do with that. I was trying some beers once I got back last night, drinking Turtles All the Way Down, which is a beautiful American pale. Had a wonderful all Vienna malt West Coast IPA. Vienna, when you brew a West Coast IPA, you mostly use like Pilsner and pale malt, and then some Cara malt or some Crystal malt or some Munich malt. Or you could just go Vienna the whole way through and see if you can get that sort of character from that base malt that has that caramel character. And it was pretty good, but I don't know, I prefer a slight bigger kick of that Cara kind of character than the Vienna gives. But the hop character was beautiful on it. Very, very balanced. Had a lovely mix between that. That bittersweetness is what's so important in a Westie, and it was perfect. So excited to drink more of those beers and to work with those guys.
Definitely.
Yeah. Cool. Shall we get to our video? Because we've got a big question this week, as I've already trialed. So I'm conscious we should get to the video and then try to redefine cask ale. for the rest of the pod.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, let's get on to it then. So we were back on the hype train, Johnny. We had some tickets to ride the hype train. And the destination this week was Monkish, wasn't it? The town of Monkish.
Anaheim. The town of Monkish, yeah. Anaheim,
the town
California.
of Monkish.
Which I must apologise. We had a couple of comments from people going, it's not in LA, it's in Anaheim. And I'm going to get in trouble for this. But if you Google where Anaheim is, LA doesn't really stop before it becomes Anaheim. Like they're next door to each other and there's no gap in between. It's like saying that beer's not from London, it's from Peckham. And you're like, well, yeah, same thing, right? Sorry, America.
Yeah, I would say so. Like, I've never been to LA, but it's kind of like a mega city, isn't it? It sprawls out.
Yeah.
It's not like, I don't see it as a massively tall city. It's like a real super wide, sort of like sprawling, lots of freeways and stuff. Like, you have to drive to sort of get around it. So yeah, Anaheim, I reckon, why not? Let's lump it in.
Two English guys who've never been there, we're calling it.
Yeah.
It's the same city.
Why wouldn't they want to be part of Los Angeles, the city of angels?
A whale's vagina, I believe.
With a whale's vagina.
Oh, no, wait, that's San Diego.
Burgundy. Oh, yeah, that is San Diego.
Yeah.
San Diego.
Anyway.
Yeah, we said we were going to be quick.
Yeah, we did, yeah. So, yeah, we were in Monkish and we were drinking 3 IPAs. Pleasingly, one was a West Coaster. Which we didn't actually reference in the video, but I remember if you watch the full version of my interview with Vinny, we actually briefly mentioned Monkish. Clearly, him and the founder of Monkish are friends, and the Westie did kind of remind me of Blind Pig a little bit, less aromatic, but very. I feel like they've probably exchanged a lot of notes on making West Coast IPAs. So yeah, the Westie quite enjoyed, but I think it would have been better if it was fresher. And the other two were really unusual, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, one of them was kind of like creamy, coconutty, vanilla-y, which I'm not massive into the Sabro vibes. But it was quite. Do you know what? They were all really well balanced, I thought. None of them were totally bonkers. And I hate to say it, Johnny, I was maybe slightly underwhelmed because I think you just build these things up in your head so much.
Yeah, I mean that's why we do these hype train videos, because we want to see whether the breweries that have been built up in our heads are actually as good as our heads might tell us. And I think what was really interesting about Monkish was we were really surprised by it, which has never really happened on a hype train. We've always expected, it either just slightly falls short of our expectations or slightly exceeds them. With this one, our expectations were subverted because the beers were extremely light, extremely pale, none of that kind of really chewy, pillowy kind of texture, and really dry, fairly bitter, and really light body. And a couple of people in the comments were saying that I was right in saying apparently Monkish don't do much water treatment. And somebody else said that maybe to get that really thin character, they're using some sugar. So you'd use sugar in a beer if you want to reach a higher alcohol, but not add body and malt character. And it's a perfectly valid thing to do. British breweries have been doing it for years and years. And so maybe they did that to mean that their double IPAs are a little bit lighter, perhaps, than most of those New England's made. And somebody also in the comments, I forget who, was saying that the triple IPAs are their best beers. I don't think I've ever enjoyed a triple IPA, but hey, I'll believe that it would be good because it would certainly be more drinkable than most triple IPAs.
Yes.
Ben M said that. Apologies. Ben M said that in the comment. Did you find any comments you want to read out?
I did. There was one from Powers 160, which just sort of, I think, hit the nail on the head. He just said, it's easy to get sucked into the hype and start spending more than you can easily afford. So really, really pleased to hear some balanced, honest reviews from you guys who know their stuff. Not sure I know my stuff, but Jonny certainly does.
Sure you do.
Great. I guess I do. And great to reinforce the message of discovering what your local breweries are doing and supporting them, which I think, we've all come to realise that, we've got to kind of cherish local things and support them more so. And I think now, at this point, there are great beers great breweries around the world that are making New England IPAs. They're making West Coast IPAs. You don't necessarily need to get beers, ferried across from America to have an incredible drinking experience. Potentially, you're going to have a better one.
Yeah. I was trying to look back at hype breweries where we thought that the quality might justify, really doing a beer trade or trying to get your hands on it, or as we always advise, literally going there, which is the best way to enjoy it. And I think from our hype trains so far, probably the Alchemist and Treehouse and maybe Hill Farmstead are the ones that have really sort of deserved it. I think none of the others quite have. So yeah, I mean, hopefully that means that our playlist is working. We are discovering the ones that we believe genuinely are worthy of the hype, and the other ones where you could be like, well, if you're in the UK, you've got Verdant, Daya, all that lot, or if you're in Canada, you've got some incredible New England brewers as well. If we're just talking New England styles, so yeah, hopefully that means it's working. In the comments, I was blown away by the divisiveness of Monkish. I didn't realise that there were quite a lot of people that think that the beers are no good at all.
Wow.
Which might be something to do with the fact that they aren't these big, chewy, really overwhelming IPAs. But also a lot of people referencing Hotburn, which we definitely got. I mean, these beers weren't crazy fresh. They were 7 or 8 weeks old. But we still got, that kind of powdery, tannic kind of finish on them, the really lingering powdery bitterness. Probably 6 weeks ago, that would have been pretty harsh. Because really fresh beers, they can be what's kind of called green, which is where you get a real kind of hot burn from the acids in the hops that need to round out. And yeah, a couple of people said they really got that if they drank it fresh at the brewery, real hot burn.
Do you think potentially that's something that Monkish are looking for when they brew, rather than it being a fault? Do you think they're leaning into how crazy burny it is?
Yeah, I think you have to. I think if you're going to serve stuff up in your tap room that has hot burn, that's got to be on purpose, right? Monkish make fantastic beer of several different styles, and so for them to sort of be like, but these ones, they can sneak out their hot burny, but it doesn't matter, it just doesn't compute. It must be a decision they make that, maybe instead of bitterness, this hot burn adds structure, which I've heard people say. I do not understand that point of view. I do not want any hot burn of any description in any of my beers. But some people literally look for it. I don't know. Maybe they've been smokers their whole lives and they're used to the burn.
Well, yeah. Do you think that's what it is? Is people that have dulled their palate by just eating extreme amounts of chili and smoking 20 Rothman a day or whatever?
Yeah, well, I think. Oh, did I hear Jeff in the background there?
You can hear Jeff, and I've got the proper microphone today, so everyone at home can probably hear Jeff as well. I might chase her out the room. Hang on, go on. You keep talking, Jonny. I'm still here.
Okay. Yeah, I think potentially we talk about sort of what Vinny at Russian River calls the lupulin threshold shift, or this idea that things need to get more bitter and more bitter and more bitter because people get used to or come to tolerate bitterness in beer. And I wonder whether that's what's happened with the people that enjoy hot burn. They're looking for something bigger, something bolder every single time, and through doing that, hot burn becomes an acceptable thing or something you'd even start to look for. But I think that's a dangerous precedent to set, because there's only one way to go from there, and that's even more hot burny, and I think you're going to start doing your bloody throat damage at some point. But
esophageal problems.
Exactly, yeah. But I mean, to be clear, we didn't get that on these beers. These beers, there was a bit of green, there was a bit of lingering powdery bitterness, but it wasn't burny by any stretch of the imagination. It was relatively well rounded, just a bit too much for me.
What was that terminology you just said? Vinny said about the shift of
the lupulin threshold shift.
Oh my god, this sounds like something out of Star Trek, like a new drive system that's going to revolutionise travelling across a star system.
Yeah, no, it's just hop geeks wanting more hot burn, apparently. Or more bitterness, I guess. That's sort of the origins of it, but maybe it's turned to hot burn now because you don't get bitterness in New England IPAs. But you should have bitterness in New England IPAs. When I brew hazy beers, like actually, no, I haven't added bittering additions to The Brave... No, yes, I did. What am I talking about, Bradley? Yes, I put some bittering additions into my Brave Noise beer because I don't want next to 0 IBUs, so I've hopped it to 27 IBUs.
You deviated slightly from the model, right?
I did, which is okay. Yeah, I added the extra Whirlpool hops by accident because I didn't press record when I was filming. And then, I threw in some Magnum because I wanted a little bit of bitterness, a little bit of structure to the start of the beer, just because I've got to get through 20 litres of it. Because, that's the joy of homebrew. You can take a recipe, but you're brewing for use. You can make little tweaks to suit your palate. So, yeah, whenever I drink drink New England's, I am looking for IBUs of at least 25, preferably 35 or even 40. Which, to put that in context, is still less than Pilsner Urquell. So it's not great levels of bitterness. Cool. So that's this week's video. I hope you enjoyed that one, and do check out our other hype trains where we've drunk some of the world's most famous beers. Shall we dig into the question for this week, which is, very, very in-depth. Here we go. So this is a question from Niles Raddle of MA USA, who's actually asking about a very, very British thing.
Hey, Jonny and Brad. I have a simple question for you this week. What are your thoughts around CAMRA's revised definition of real ale with their new term of live beer and the changes to defining cask-conditioned beer? Cheers.
So, Niles, I like how you started that by saying a simple question. It's not. Well, maybe it's a simple question. It's not got a simple answer.
Yes.
So, should we start, for those that don't know? Well, I'll start by going through what the change to the definition is that CAMRA have given us. So, it was released in January this year, and basically it was a response to the fact that brewing has entirely changed since this definition was written in the 70s. And basically what they've said is they've kind of moved cask down a tier. So, actually, the main definition they talk about is what's called live beer. Mm-hmm. Now, live beer, the definition of that is that in the final packaging of the beer, so the bottle, the can, the cask, the keg, whatever it is, there's at least 0.1 million cells of yeast. What's 0.1 million? Is that 10,000 yeast cells per?
0.1 million. So is it 1,000 million? Oh no, hang on. You're saying a million. 0.1 million. I don't fucking know. 1,000 is a million, right? I think.
I don't know. But lots of cells. I mean, to put that into context, generally for a bottle conditioned beer, I think you'd have 1 million cells. So it's not a lot of yeast that needs to go into that final packaging. They're not necessarily looking now for it to be enough to create lots of carbonation. It's actually the shift that they've made here is to talk about flavour rather than carbonation, which is quite interesting. So they're saying there's got to be enough live yeast in this packaging to create a measurable drop in gravity, so a measurable drop in the amount of sugar in the beer, and to affect the flavour.
Right.
So it's sort of opening it up to beers that you might put in a bottle to potentially age. It's probably opening it up to, key keg conditioned beer, and even what people sort of call bright cask beer. So it's cask beer that's served. So it's beer that's served through a hand pull and pulled from a cask manually, but it hasn't actually got its carbonation from the package. It's got its carbonation beforehand, and you've just put it in like a keg beer. But it's just a lower amount of carbonation. So quite a lot of cask ales are served that way pretty much these days, which is why conditioning times in cellars of pubs has really gone down, and you can pretty much put it in, let it settle for 24 hours and bang it on. So they're shifting towards sort of those changes, like more aged beer, more beer going into package with live yeast in, and more unusual forms of pulling a beer out through the traditional hand pull. And to sort of justify that, they've said it's got to affect the flavour as much as the gravity. So that's the definition of live beer. And I think that's pretty cool. I think I'm kind of down with that. It's weird. I don't know why they've picked 0.1 million or why they put 0.1 million and not 10,000 or whatever it is. I'd be interested to see how they've come up with that. But so the other big change they've made is then underneath that, so once you've got live beer, you could then have cask conditioned beer. So this is the beer that is pulled out of a traditional hand pull with no extraneous CO2 added to the beer. So it is sort of the old definition of cask. But they've sort of done this in a slightly unusual way in that they've also, within the definition, kind of answered a lot of the grumbles and almost pushed back against some of the criticisms that a lot of hardcore cask ale lovers have about other styles, other ways of pouring. So within that definition, they say that hazy beer is fine,
Right.
which is a big change, and that's going to
That is
cause
a
some
big change.
consternation.
Yeah.
So they're saying both are authentic. The clear beer probably just means it's fined, and if you know, not all beer has to be fined. You don't have to do that. So it's, I guess what they're probably saying is check with the pub, but it might well be that it's fine being hazy.
Jonny, is there a T-shirt in a sort of almost a sort of kind of it's fine not to be fined, like a sort of mental health kind of T-shirt, but about beer? I reckon.
Keep workshopping that one.
Okay, it's fine
Keep
not to be
workshopping
fined. We'll sell it to CAMRA. They can buy it off us.
There you go. We'll make our millions that way. So yeah, they've said that haze is okay. They've kind of defined the level of carbonation, which is quite interesting. So they've said that a cask ale should be around 1.1 volumes, which is probably just under half of what you'd expect from a classic craft keg beer, like an IPA or a pale ale. Would generally be between around 2.4 to 2.7-ish, I think, would be probably a classic volume for a keg beer. And they've also interestingly said that adding inert gas is okay. So one of the big issues with cask beer is that as you pour it, you're sucking in oxygen into that cask, because all it is a tap in the cask with an opening at the top. So you're pulling out beer and it's being replaced with oxygen. What they're saying is now within the definition, it's okay if you want to, you know, put some kind of contraption in that means that it's carbon dioxide going in.
So that means that cask can potentially last a lot longer.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit longer. Maybe not a lot longer, but a little bit longer.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
Which used to not be allowed within the definitions, and people used to get very uppity if they knew that you were putting CO2 into those casks. But yeah, it's now said that it's okay to do that. So I think that's a huge and positive step. I think saying that haze is good is a huge and positive step. Kind of roughly defining the carbonation, I think I don't quite know why they put it in, but sure, it's fine. The carbonation should be lower. That's part of the traditions. It should be a tickle on the tongue, not a all-out assault. So that's cool. But then Bradley, we get some weird things that have been put in.
Go on.
And I have no idea where they come from. So one thing is it says that the hops that are used should be whole or pelletized or compressed.
So no crazy frozen guys or anything like that?
No, frozen would be fine because that's still pelleted. But you can't use hop
okay.
extracts.
Oh, interesting.
So, I mean, lots of modern breweries use hop extracts because you get a much more reliable, calculable form of bitterness. And I can't see any reason why they'd have put that in, why they've decided that using whole hops is more traditional, because there's no real historical base in that. Like, extracts have been used for decades. So that was slightly weird. They've also said
that does feel like it's you got to use hops, guys. You got. I want to feel those hops. I want to see them going in. I don't want any witchcraft going on with liquids.
But I mean, if you're going to allow cryo hops, it's only one more step to, instead of having a powdered, highly concentrated pellet, you've just liquidized it and extracted the oils. It
doesn't make a lot of sense, really, does it?
As far as the user's
chemically
concerned,
wise,
the user, the drinker, it makes zero fucking difference. So that's a bit weird. It's just clinging on to tradition for tradition's sake, I think. They've also said that the cellar temperature should be between 11 and 14, which, to my mind, is nonsense. Not only, so there was, I think it was Caskmark maybe, went around the country and measured the temperatures and criticised pubs for serving it at 14. So there's a slight contradiction there. But also, they did a survey to see what temperature people want their cask, and people said between 8 and 10. So the public is calling for one temperature, and CAMRA's going, no, it's got to be this one, which doesn't make a lot of sense.
So do you think that is a little hat off or whatever to pubs that aren't able to get that low? And
well, pubs shouldn't be serving cask if they can't get it cool enough.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
But also, like,
if
from
CAMRA's
perspective,
that warm and it's stored that warm, it's going to go off quicker.
Yeah.
So they're not helping anybody.
But from CAMRA's perspective, they're like, we're trying to keep it in as many places as possible. If we have this little sin or whatever of serving it at that temperature, it gets to stay in all these pubs. Like, especially if you're saying it's backed up by.
Yeah, but if it's
So if it's backed up by surveys and stuff where they've gone around and measured temperature, is it sort of, are they just being permissible so it stays on in places?
Well, no, because when Castmark went round there, they measured the temperature, said it was too warm, and said that the beer was compromised as a result. So if the plan for CAMRA is to encourage more pubs to have it by saying it doesn't have to be that cold, that's just damaging the whole situation, because all that means is you're going to have thousands of bad pints being poured, and that's not going to do cask any help, especially when the main issue with cask is that people think it tastes, like dishwater, like vinegar, whatever it is, because all of these terrible warm pints are being served. So it's just absolutely bonkers that they've put 11 to 14. It should, to my mind, it should be 8 to 10. And I'd accept 12. So that's a bit weird. And then there's this super weird, out of nowhere sentence where they say that for technical reasons, soured or barrel-aged beer might not be good in cask. You're like, who the fuck decided that?
Soured or barrel-aged beer might not be good in cask. That's very... Why bother saying that? Like, any beer might not be good in cask if it's not treated well.
Exactly.
Right? So those beers are going to be delicious if they've had a good life and they get drunk quickly. So what's the problem?
Well, I mean, also, like, historically, so until keg beer was invented, every beer came out of a cask, and most of them would have been sour or bretted. So, A, that's super ahistorical. But B, there's also lots of wooden casks that are served. There's even a whole society, the Society for Beer Poured from the Wood, that literally say beer is best served from wood. So it's just a bonkers sentence, and my jaw hit the floor when I read that, because it was just so subjective. Whereas everything they've done with the live beer and the cask definitions elsewhere are all pretty scientifically based. We've got literal figures for, millions of cells and for levels of carbonation by volume. But then they just go, oh, by the way, sour beer is shit in cask. Why have they needed to write that? It makes absolutely no sense to me. So basically, on the whole, I think it's great. I think it's going to widen the definition. It's going to cause a lot of people that are a little bit too, extreme in their views about what cask beer is and what it should be and what it stands for. Is great. But yeah, just those three things are just utterly bonkers. And the sooner they're stripped back out, the better. If CAMRA wants to help modernise the cask ale segment. Sorry, the live beer segment, I should say.
Yeah, man. 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Wow, that was pretty in-depth and unexpected. I'm amazed that they allow the inert gas stuff to go on now. I feel like that is maybe less cask than any of the other sort of factors.
Yeah, I guess they've decided, if it's not... I think the people that have had issues with that have been saying that if you're serving a beer at 10 degrees... you're putting a blanket of CO2 in there. Some of that CO2 is going to go into the beer because at lower temperatures, the beer will suck some of that CO2 up. So they're saying that's adding unnatural gas, like gas that isn't formed during fermentation.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that CAMRA have just come out and gone, like, we're better off having that blanket and a little bit of cheeky CO2 getting in than we are just constantly oxidizing our beers over 48, 72 hours.
Do you think we're going to get to a point where there's a distinction made between traditional cask, which hasn't got that sort of added gas functionality brought in, and the stuff that has? Like, are we gonna get super cask heads that are gonna seek out places that do it the old way?
Well, we already have that.
Yeah.
That sort of already exists. It's just that now CAMRA are backing the people that don't ask and don't care.
Yeah. Interesting.
But yeah, you're right. It could cause some divisions, but I'm glad that CAMRA's on this side of it now, because I think, they've identified that the biggest issue for cask beer is the overall quality of it. And that's a huge step that that pubs can take to address that. And they just need to ignore the bit about serving cask ale at 14 bloody degrees.
Yeah, that is weird. That is super weird. I wonder why that is. Maybe we need to get an inside.
I'm gonna email the chief exec today, Bradley.
Yeah.
And find out what the thinking is behind it. I'm sure there'll be a reason, and it might even be a valid reason, but it strikes me as bizarre properly bizarre.
If they said like 8 to 14, that would maybe, be more of a range. But the fact that, what was it, 11 to 14, did you say?
Yeah. Whereas I think I don't think the old definition said a temperature, but the advice is 10 to 12. That's sort of the sort of what people talk about when they talk about the temperatures of casks. So why we've said 2 degrees higher is you might be right. It might be saying to people it's okay to serve it at 14, but it's not. It's just not.
Yeah, I feel like it has to be
at 14 degrees unless you're trying to age it.
I feel like that's a committee decision that they've gone, okay, we do that, and then it's a compromise, and people will be okay. They won't be able to. Anyway, yeah, like we agree, it's going to be a worse beer for it. So that's not good. It's not good, CAMRA.
Not a good change. But otherwise, it's been great. That's all we've got time for. That was a monster episode. I apologise for going on a polemic there. Next week, we have our Brave Noise video going live. So a little brew day of the Brave Noise beer, and then a chat with the amazing Brianne Allen, who started the campaign. It's going to be fraught in the comments. So if you're on the right side of history and you think that beer needs to do a lot more to protect the people that are in it and to be more welcoming to people, then I heartily recommend you get involved in the comments with me once it goes live and the shit slinging starts. But I'm really hoping that our video persuades some people who are skeptical about maybe they don't believe the stories, or maybe they think that it's sort of isolated cases or something. Hopefully we're going to address all of that in the video, and hopefully be part of a very important campaign. So yeah, we'll see you on Wednesday for that video, and of course next Friday for another Friday 5 p.m. The Bubble and Friday 5 p.m. podcasts are brought to you by the nerds behind YouTube's craft beer channel. You can watch over 400 mini documentaries at youtube.com/the craft beer channel. And if you love what we do, support us via Patreon and get access to merchandise and our amazing Discord forum, a positive and welcoming space for everyone who loves beer, food, and homebrewing. Love and beer. Done. That's a long one.